Welcome to tutorial 11. Last video we did the G major scale and now you're aware of two major scales, the C major and the G major. So this is a great time to get back into music theory to understand other sets of symbols that go on the music sheet. You might have heard that music theory is really complicated and it's a wonder how music majors do it. Well, this part of the series is the one that might give you that impression. But I insist that you take your time with this section, and I'm going to try to go through every concept in detail and give plenty of examples. But the video right after this is going to put all of those concepts in an applicational manner. So let's get started. You're aware of the G major scale notes from the previous lesson, but this is how you would represent a G major scale on the sheet music. Now, if you try to remember the sheets from before when we did songs in C major and the scale, the difference, the first one is that you are going to notice there's a sharp symbol on the top line of this treble clef and the second line from the top on the bass clef. That means that the note F in this scale is supposed to be sharp every time you come across it. So if you notice, the seventh note on the treble clef is on the F line, but since the F line has a sharp notation in the key signature, you're gonna think of it as F sharp. And in the treble clef, that's the second line from the top. The symbol that goes before, right after the clefs, is referred to as the key signature, and that symbol is supposed to tell you what the scale of the song is or what notes are gonna be accidentals. Quick note, accidentals are, it's a term to say that a note has a sharp or a flat variant in the sheet. And augmentation dot, this is going to be fairly common. You're going to see this symbol in a lot of sheets, and it's going to be slightly confusing, but once you understand what it mathematically means, it's really easy to read that and play accordingly. So if you see a note with a dot next to it, that means the time value of that note is multiplied by 1.5. So if you think of a quarter note which has a dot next to it, the effective time value of that note is a quarter note plus an eighth note. An eighth note in time value is a half of a quarter note. So effectively, a dotted quarter note is a quarter note plus an eighth note in time value. Augmentation dot, the notes with an augmentation dot will often be referred to as dotted notes. It's just an easier way of saying that. Rests are important. They're often overlooked in sheet music, but they are placeholders on the sheet when nothing must be played. So you will have music in which there will be sections where you don't have to play anything, and that does not mean you leave the measures on the music sheet empty. It has to be explicitly mentioned that nothing is supposed to be played in that part, and for that we have symbols called rests. um, Mathematically, a measure must always be occupied completely. It should either have notes that you are playing, or it should have rests to tell you that you're not playing anything over there. If you remember all the time values that we did for the notes, the whole note, the half note, quarter note, eighth note, and the 16th note, there are subsequent corresponding rests for each and every one of those notes. So depending on the size of your measure, you'll use the appropriate rest symbol to either fill up the bar completely or maintain that the measure has nothing to be played. A rest cannot have augmentation dot, unlike notes. So if you had a 1.5x measure, you cannot use a rest with a dot next to it. You have to use the extended symbols. We have to use the component rests. Let's get to the example for that. So here you have a chart that tells you the time value of the note and the subsequent symbol for it. So for the whole note, the rest looks like a segment that's drawn from the second line from the top, but it's drawn below the line. The below the line distinction is important because the rest notation for the half note is the same, except it's on the third line and it's above the line. For the quarter note, it's pretty distinct, and eighth note onwards, there's a compounding that happens. So on the eighth note, you have that symbol over there which extends when you go to further divisions. So if you go to a 16th note, you're gonna have two flags on the rest symbol also. Any division going further just keeps adding flags to the symbol. Here is an example of rests being used in a sheet. So rest positions on the sheet are pretty static, so they don't go on any other lines. For say, if you see the first bar on that sheet has a whole note in the bass clef, and the treble clef has its corresponding rest. It's on the second line and it's a block that's drawn under the line. The second bar has two half notes, and the two rests on the treble clef are blocks drawn on the third line but above the line. Quarter notes, as we saw from the chart, is the same thing. Eighth notes have 8 consecutive rests in place. Now, it's it's okay to again draw the same rest for the whole note in that place too if you need it to. In terms of substituting no rests with one value that tells you the complete bar is on rest, that's totally fine. At the same time, if there were two different blocks over there for half notes instead of those eighth note rests, that's fine as well. And same goes for the 16th. But the reason they have been arranged like that for in this sheet is for learning purposes. It's so that you can see how rests go on a sheet. Ties are note they are symbols that go on bars to tell you that a note has been extended across a bar, and a tie line can only go from a note to the exact same note in the next bar. If like a tie line cannot connect one note to a different note in the next bar. So here the dotted note would have meant the same thing that it's trying to explain, but if you notice, the measure is 4/4 time signature, and 4/4 as in 4 quarter beats means that a whole note will occupy the full bar, and there's no way of adding more notes to that bar since it's occupied. In this case, you would draw a half note in the next bar and draw a tie line. The whole note is 4 beats and the half note is 2 beats. So together it becomes 6 beats that is represented in a sheet that has a 4/4 meter. A 6 beat note cannot go in a 4/4 meter within one measure itself, and that's why it has to overflow into the next one, and a tie line helps us do that. Also, if you notice in the second bar, you had a half note that's being played at the first beginning of the bar, but like I said, we cannot leave a bar empty for the rest of it. So if nothing needs to be played for the rest of the bar, you can add a half rest over there. And if you see the bass clef, there's 2 whole rests over there. A slur is going to be a line that looks like a tie, but it's not trying to extend the length of a note across a bar. If you see a slur line on a sheet, it just says try to play the notes continuously instead of playing one, releasing it, and then playing the next one, which might not sound continuous. The best way to show this to you would be practical, and you'll see that in the next video. Putting it all together, we have a 3/4 meter sheet over here. 3/4 is a great time signature to explain rests and dotted notes and other concepts, because you have a meter over here that is smaller than the whole note, which means using the whole note in this sheet or any of the measure of this sheet is going to be virtually impossible. If you notice, in the beginning of the sheet there's no notes to be played, and thus you use 2/4 rests over there, and then the notes come in. And in the bass clef you're not playing anything, so you have a rest note over there. Then you go to the next one. You can see a tie line in the first and second bar. The note goes from um, the note over there is a D note, but the note in the next bar is an E note. So it's easy to confuse that as a tie line, but since they are different notes, that's a slur. Going forward in the second bar, if you see the bass clef, the notes over there have dotted notes. That means the time value of those notes is 1.5 times of the symbol. So that symbol is a half note. 1.5 times of a half note is going to be half plus a quarter, or you could even think of it as 3 quarters, which is exactly what's happening in the treble clef over there. You can see that there are 3 quarter notes in that bar, and thus the bass clef is also full because of using dotted notes. For the majority of this sheet, the bass clef just has dotted half notes, and that's the reason why you don't need to add more rests or any other notes in the bass clef, except for the last bar from the behind. For the third last bar from the back, you'll see that the half notes don't have dots next to it, which means you are left with a quarter note amount of space in that bar, and that's why a quarter rest is used over there. There's a bonus question for you. If you can figure out which song this is before the next video, that means you have properly understood sheet reading concepts from the beginning till all the things that we've done so far. But in the next video, we're going to use this exact sheet to learn your first song in the G major scale and understand all of these sheet music symbols. So see you in the next lesson.